I do not expect any of you to believe all of this or all of you to believe any of this. If you don't want to believe any of it, I wouldn't blame you a bit because it's strange. It really doesn't fit into any comfortable category. It is a UFO story, but not really. It touches on some poltergeist-type stuff, cryptozoology stuff, witchcraft, government conspiracy, animal mutilations, quantum theory, you name it. If you're expecting tidy explanations about how all this fits together, you won't get them from me. Maybe you can give them to me. The only thing I can say with any certainty after delving into this part of the investigation is that reality, at least for me, isn't what it used to be. There are really two stories to consider regarding this ranch. One is about the ranch itself, where a series of very bizarre events terrorized a family and baffled a community over a long period of time. The second story is about a scientific adventure, an attempt by legitimate, credentialed scientists to investigate the unknown, something that the science establishment all too often avoids. And the study that was undertaken was not perfect by any means, but it was a remarkable undertaking and probably represents the most intense study of a paranormal hotspot ever. The risks for the research team were very real, and not only from a standpoint of their professions and their professional credibility, but physically. This thing that I'm going to tell you about, this entity or intelligence or whatever it was or is, exerted control over mind and matter in ways that we don't understand. It seemingly has the ability to manipulate people, animals, technology, and maybe space and time themselves. It demonstrated an ability to kill, to dismember, and to terrorize. And it seemingly fed on the fear that its actions generated. And it's tempting to say that this thing is evil, because it did some evil things we would call evil, but evil's sort of in the eye of the beholder. And my guess that it might be a mistake to assign human motives to something that certainly does not appear to be human at all. A Utah State University professor named Frank Salisbury, some pretty pictures by the way, Frank Salisbury wrote an excellent book called The Utah UFO Display, which detailed this incredible concentration of unidentified aerial objects over this basin. His book was largely based on the case files of a school teacher named Joseph Jr. Hicks, who had personally investigated 400 of the most compelling UFO cases from that area. Anyway, this book, including Joseph Hicks' 400 best cases, included daylight saucer sightings, landings, humanoid occupants, close encounters, missing time, and later mutilated animals. Because he was a science teacher in a small town and was high up in the Mormon church for many, many years, Hicks basically knew everyone who lives in the basin, and everyone trusted him, which is why he was able to get them to tell him things they might never admit to an outsider or a smarty-pants reporter like you-know-who. As his students grew into adulthood, they continued to tell him their UFO stories, often in confidence, and there are so many of them to tell. That's the ranch. It's 480 acres, well-watered, a beautiful property. It's surrounded by other similar ranches. In the middle of the picture there, you see a ridge. That's Skinwalker Ridge. It's this giant sandstone ridge that sort of dominates the property. On this side is a well-watered creek. The entire property is well-watered. That's one of the observation posts that was built by NIDS, which I'll tell you about that a little bit later. But it's a beautiful property. And the previous owners were not only secretive, but a little paranoid about the place. For example, the previous owners stipulated in the deed that the Gormans, before they do any digging on the property, had to get their permission. Tom Gorman thought, well, that's kind of quaint, that's kind of weird, okay, signed it anyway. Didn't think about it much until later when things got pretty strange. One thing they noticed when they moved into that, keep in mind that that facility right there, that white trailer and the corral, because we're going to come back to that in a little bit. They noticed when they moved into the house that there were thick metal stakes in the ground at both ends of the house, by both of the doors. Stakes that had these heavy chains on them, presumably to hang on to big guard dogs that were situated at both doors. And then they noticed that all the doors had bolts on both sides. Not only the doors inside the house, but the doors in bedrooms, closets, things of that sort, as if these people were security crazy. We'll look at some of the big dramatic events involving UFOs and beings and things like that. But I'll just tell you, it's the little events that really get to me, the little tiny things that raise the goosebumps on my skin. In a nutshell, things started moving around. Inanimate objects somehow become animated. Everyday tools or dishes or possessions seemingly pursued their own agendas. At first, it was simply irritating. Tom Gorman, the dad of the family, was out in the pasture. He's using a post hole digger, sets it right, in front of him, takes a drink of water, wipes his brow, looks around. It's gone. It's gone. They found it 3 weeks later, 75 feet up in a tree, right near where he'd been working. The mom, Ellen, she goes to town. She buys enough groceries for a couple of weeks. She comes back, puts them all on the kitchen table, takes all the groceries out, puts them away in the cabinet, goes into another room for 15, 20 seconds, comes back, all the groceries are back in the bags. The mom would do things like this. In the morning, she'd take a shower every morning. She goes into the bathroom, locks the door. She puts a towel and a hairbrush on the cabinet, takes her shower, comes out, presumably to find the towel there, but many of the times it would be gone. The door's still locked, the towel and the hairbrush are gone. They find them later in odd places, like in a microwave oven or in the freezer. They started seeing shapes and shadows in the house. At night, they'd wake up hearing these heavy footsteps in the hall or the kitchen or right outside their bedroom door. When Tom would get up to investigate, nothing there. Large, dark, humanoid figures would appear at their windows and later at the foot of their beds. The family was rattled, to say the least. They started hearing disembodied voices speaking in a language that they did not recognize. Tom and Ellen are out walking at night. They hear these voices. It sounded like they're coming 10, 15 feet above their head, speaking in this language, but in mocking tones, almost like they're laughing at them. So they'd yell back. Voices would be quiet for a minute, and then the laughing starts up again. They couldn't understand the words at all, of course. Again and again, everyday objects like frying pans and spatulas and tools would move, would disappear, reappear, turning up in odd places. On some nights, the entire homestead would be bathed in white light that was coming from above. Other times, it appeared that the beams of light coming right out of the ground, up into the sky. Frequently, the family would hear these loud mechanical noises under their feet, as if there was some kind of like a subterranean steel mill or a railroad operating underground. On the first day that they moved onto the property, there's this giant wolf. They're unloading their stuff at the corral, and they look across the pasture, and it's huge. And they're thinking to themselves, we didn't know there were wolves in this area. It starts meandering towards them, kind of shy, sheepish. They're thinking, this must be somebody's pet. It must be domesticized. And it walks right up into the family group and is sort of rubbing up against them. They remember that it had rained that day, and they remember smelling a wet dog kind of a smell. Well, as they're standing there, there's 3 or 4 of their high-end calves are in the corral, and one of them made the unfortunate mistake of sticking its nose out the bar, and this wolf that was standing there among the family leaps at it, grabs it by the head, trying to pull it out the bars with its powerful jaws. The father grabs an axe handle, beats this wolf a couple of times, kicks it in the ribs. It's not even making a yelp, doesn't make any sound at all. He's having no effect. His kid runs to the truck, grabs a handgun, a .357, brings it back to the dad. Boom, he shoots it. Boom, shoots it again a second time. Not a sound, no blood, no anything. And now this calf is starting to die. It's in bad shape. They run into the house, got a hunting rifle, and he tells the family to stand back and takes a shot at this thing, point blank, boom. This is the 3rd shot, takes a 4th shot, and that's when the wolf sort of just drops the calf and stands there and looks at him. Still in no distress, still no blood. He takes aim. Tom, by the way, is a world-class big game hunter, in addition to being a really experienced with cattle. Takes aim at this wolf, shoots it right in the middle of the chest. A chunk of flesh flies out the side, flesh and fur, and plops there, and the wolf turns around and starts trotting away slowly. They grab another gun, figuring we don't want a giant wolf that comes up this high and then has 5 shots in it wandering around wounded. So they get a gun, they go after it. And they ran down to that marshy area by the water that you saw there that was running in that video and start tracking it. And this thing must have weighed 200 pounds, so it's easy to follow the tracks. They sink 2-3 inches into the mud. It gets out into a clearing. There's nothing else around for another 30 feet in any direction, and the tracks stopped. Gone.